basically comparing it to, like, for example, two athletes, one that does practice yoga consistently
Hmm.
and another who doesn't, like, what benefits will the one who does have over the other one who doesn't?
Well, I can say this from my experience. I've done 3 jiu-jitsu competitions as white belt, so nothing serious, nothing crazy, but
Mm,
enough for me to feel like sensation of nerves. My first ones, I was quite new in the practice of yoga, maybe been practicing like half a year,
mm,
and I went to the practice and I went to the competition, sorry, and I was really nervous, really anxious about competing and doing all this stuff. I felt like super just worked up. You know, the sort of feelings you would get before you do an audition or before you're on the stage or there's
mm,
something with high stakes in front of you.
yeah.
So this was one way I really noticed it. Down the line, a year, 2 years, moved to Australia. I did another competition. Obviously, I was a little bit more experienced with my jiu-jitsu itself,
Mm,
but I had also dived a lot deeper into the practice of the breathwork and how that's going to work for me. And I noticed the difference I had was I practiced 5 minutes of breathing before the competition, and my nerves had pretty much just like subsided. And I was very calm, unusually calm. I'm not normally that calm when I go to compete. I feel like the pressure of things, I get quite nervous before a competition. And I was comparing that to the other blue belt who was next to me, who had more jiu-jitsu experience, more competition experience,
mm,
but was really nervous. They were
yeah.
quite built up. They were quite anxious about this competition that they were coming into. And the only difference between us, obviously, he had more jiu-jitsu experience, but I had the yoga tool in my arsenal to again lower that nervous system activation. You could see he was quite up high in his sympathetic activation. He was quite fight or flight,
Mm,
very
very
anxious.
anxious.
And
Yeah.
I managed to calm that feeling. And being anxious is good because obviously you're going into a situation where it's, you know, potentially life-threatening circumstances, depending on
Mm.
what you're doing.
It's like your body's reaction
Yeah,
to
or
it.
even if you're just doing an acting audition, your body doesn't realize it's not life or death. It still gives you the same reaction
Mm,
through the nervous system. It still gives you those oh shit, fight or flight response because
mm,
we're just cavemen who have been wired that way, right? So we live in a different world now. And I just noticed how much calmer I was able to get myself. And in terms of the performance, this is where it was amazing because when you're too anxious, like we discussed before, you you get to the area of peak performance, your flow state, and it dips off really quick because you become super hyped up on your sympathetic and there's no balance in your nervous system
mm.
anymore.
Can't maintain it.
You can't maintain it. I was able to maintain that flow state for longer because of the breath.
Mm,
And that really had a massive benefit for me. And in terms of the body itself as well, like you build a lot of flexibility to the point where depending on what your sport like asks of you from an athletic like perspective, flexibility can be a really good thing for avoiding injury as well as strength. So if you get put into a position, especially in jiu-jitsu, you get put into a position where your legs super extended. If you're not flexible, that muscle is gonna it's gonna get injured pretty easily. But if you're able to flex in that position and have the strength to remain there as well,
yeah.
you're not gonna have the higher chance of injury. And that's what I noticed in myself. Personally, I experienced through the yoga,
Mm,
but that was just kind of not even the main point. When I realized I could control how nervous I was before I competed, I was like, this is a superpower almost.
yeah.
And you'll see people, for example, like the Gracie family. They're a big name. They're pretty much like the pioneers of modern jiu-jitsu, right?
Yeah.
They brought it mainstream through the UFC early days. They were big proponents of breath, especially before competitions. And they
Mm,
did it, breath exercises on the side of the mats because they knew that it had benefits for the nervous system and it helped you perform, helped you be calm. And think of it as strength training for the lungs as well. You're just waking the lungs up, you're getting some flow there, and you're able to just like take more breaths in over time. You build your CO2 tolerance so you're
yeah.
not as getting as puffed as fast. It's just such a beneficial practice. And that's aside from like physically doing the class. That's just the breath and the meditation.
Yeah.
On top of the strength you build through poses and the flexibility, you're you're building a pretty robust body. So for athletes, not only doing yoga, but supplementing it in with the other training, I think is just massively beneficial, especially if you're having to perform in some sort of competition or like a rugby match, NFL, whatever you do, I think it's beneficial.
Yeah.
And for acting, if you're about to go into an audition and maybe there's high stakes, maybe it's
Mm,
like, man, this is my one chance to get that big role that I've always been wanting. You're going to want to realize the stakes, but your body, you already realize the stakes, but your
mm,
body is going to be super anxious for that. Using the breath to bring yourself down, not too much. You don't want to be too relaxed, but bring yourself down to that perfect balance point. It's going to be nothing but beneficial for you and able to like get your best performance out there. And
yeah.
I think such a useful tool for regulating that for athletes and high performers, especially, it's massive. And that's the
Mm.
bit that's I can speak on my experience on that.